Afternoon, and let me express my happiness in being a part of this maritime investors meet, which is running now for the second and the third day, I think. And to talk about issues which so matter for India's growth in this area, I commend the Minister, Sarvanand Sonowalji, and also his entire ministry for having taken this initiative. And I can see a lot of energy in the various halls where the discussions are happening. And I've been asked to participate in this particular forum, which talks about maritime financing, insurance, and arbitration. Whilst there's, as is for any politician standing before a mic, whilst there's just a lot of things to say, I'll try to focus on how in the last 9 years the government under Prime Minister Modi has made a conscious attempt to focus on this area, the blue economy, maritime concerns for India, having ships with Indian flag, looking at training our manpower, because we have the youth which is revving to want to do a lot of things. They go outside the country to get themselves trained. We need to provide them the possible best training which they can acquire for being part of this global Sagarmala adventure which Government of India is supportive of. But if this mark one side of the story, more important side is, what about the financing? What kind of a recognition do we give for this sector? And is it just shipping? Is it not port development? And so on. So I just want to highlight some of the main focus that this government has given in the last 9 years, so that before I really address the issue of financing, of looking at insurance, and also seeing where the future lies for us, we also have eminent judges, now heads of the Global Financial Services Center, which India is now actively promoting, and also those experienced in government decision and policy making. So in the last 9 years, I just want to highlight some of the main decisions which has brought our maritime and shipping and port sector onto the fore. It's not happened overnight. We've had a fairly laid back pre-2014 in this area. Now it's come up. And for the 9 years, what are the kind of things which I'll just draw a few to your attention. First of all, I don't want to sound cliched, but P to the power of 3 is what happened in the last 9 years. What do I mean by that? We've seen ports as a key to prosperity, a key to progress, and a key to productivity. And therefore the port-led development approach saw all these three as the end of the objective, and therefore gave a lot of focus on developing ports. Enormous efforts have gone to upgrade our ports and make sure that they're up to the 21st century challenges. And a part of that was when Prime Minister was here during the inaugural speech. He mentioned about how India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor is the vision for India. We are looking at reaching Europe, reaching Central Asian republics through a maritime plus land route reaching, and therefore cutting down on logistics costs. So comparable to the earlier Silk routes, I would think, but that is the 21st century version which India wants to present before the world. And in that, I'm glad to say many of the Middle Eastern countries, Israel, which is unfortunately now in a bit of a terrorist problem and further into Italy and Greece. So that kind of a vision is before us. 9 years ago, we started this port-led development, which is before us, and also together with the port development, also looked at inland waterways, looked at various maritime-related policy and financial support. Now, if India, let us say, between 2000 and 2023, where we are today, had received FDIs, foreign direct investments into India, for all those 23 years, 75% of all those FDIs which came between 2000 and 2023 happened in the last 9 years. I just want to highlight that, 75%. And what is that 75%? 4.2 billion US dollars happened in the last 9 years only. Total cargo handling capacity of Indian ports has doubled between 2014 and 23. It was just 1,400 million metric tons per annum, whereas now it is 2,600 million metric tons as of 23. Cargo volumes have also more than doubled. 74 million tons MTPAs in 2014-15 has gone, it's reached 74, whereas in 2014 it was only 71. Am I right? No, sorry, 74 in 2014-15, gone up to 151 now. The turnaround time, I take a bit of a satisfaction in saying this because we were initially working together with the WTO to understand trade facilitation in 2014, and at that time, after the discussions, we had taken a lot of steps towards improving the turnaround time in the ports. I wish to linger on this for a moment. World Bank's Logistics Performance Index Report of 2023 says that the turnaround time of Indian ports is now 0.9 days, which is better than Singapore, which is 1 full day, UAE 1.1 days, Germany 1.3 days, USA 1.5 days, Australia 1.7 days, Russia 1.8 days, and South Africa 2.8 days. So since 2014 to today, a lot of work has happened to facilitate turnaround in the ports. And you're now seeing Indian ports at 0.9 days. India has also risen in the global ranking of international shipment category from 44th rank in 2014 to 23rd rank in 2023. So India's overall rank in World Bank's Logistics Performance Index has also increased from 54th in 2014 to 38th in 2023. Of course, a long way to go even to perform even better, but there is in the last 9 years, absolute performance improvement that is showing. Our indigenously built, I don't know if there are people from Defense Ministry here, Navy here particularly, our indigenously built aircraft carrier, INS Vikrant, is a proof that India's shipbuilding capacity has absolutely world-class facilities and skilled manpower. So I just want to be sure that the audience is seized of these core facts which have shown us the results as a result of policy interventions, encouragement, support given by the government in the last 9 years. Now, if I come to this point of financing and policy initiatives, I know even as we were walking up to this hall, Secretary was telling me that shipping is not considered to be an industry in India. The status industry, if given by government, meets a lot of expectation. I think it's more psychological, but psychological it is important. There can be a lot of people who will say, no, not psychological. Banks won't touch us unless you give us industry status. Today, banks are also a lot more dynamic, and they don't wait for labels, but I see the point. To enhance private participation in the maritime sector, financing will play a key role in attracting public-private partnership. I give it its full play. And in order that we become Atmanirbhar, because we have everything in piecemeal. If you look at, we have the manpower, we have the technical skills, we also have some kind of a, I'm saying rudimentary, but not maybe as rudimentary would define itself, some kind of a shipping capacity, but shipbuilding and submarine building capacities have matured. So we need to have financing and insurance and arbitration and create more diverse options. I'm very glad that the people representing the arbitration, particularly from Singapore, are here. Most often our cases in the arbitration, when they go to Singapore, all of us are sitting here in India with our crossed fingers saying, how will our people handle it? Because when our case is being argued in most of the arbitration cases, we find that India's own barristers, qualified jurists, or people from our bar are not there. They're only helping people who can stand before the arbitration courts who are not Indians. I have no problem, because professionalism is important and it excels itself wherever and from wherever they come from. But most often India's problems, which are unique to its, let's say, jurisprudence or the way in which Indian systems work, are less put forward for their consideration in the arbitration courts. I have seen a few cases, and therefore this is not a Government of India opinion, but an opinion nevertheless I would put forward here, because the way in which we link with the arbitration courts has got to be improved a lot so that it meets the standards with which we can argue our case. This conference has also one very important dimension, and that is it's being held at a time when globally there is a lot of challenge. There is a lot of challenge from the point of view of insecurities of supply, disruption in supply, value chains being broken, and how is it that this is the case which I can clearly say most of us recognized even immediately after COVID, supply chain disruptions, containers not being available, and after a point the disruptions were so unpredictable that we could not plan anything for our industry. Shipments of major commodities are at risk sometime. Food insecurity, energy insecurity, all creep in because of it, add to inflation. So even economies which are coming out of COVID are still facing these challenges. So this Global Maritime Conference happening at this juncture holds a lot of relevance, and I again appreciate the Minister for having taken this initiative at this time. To support the maritime trade in this aftermath, a marine cargo pool was created to support, with the support of the insurance regulator, IRDAI, and domestic insurance companies, insurers, together with the General Insurance Corporation of India, that is more for underwriting and so on. The General Insurance Corporation of India is also into this. So I'm not sure how effective that marine cargo pool has been, and it might be useful if any of the participants in these discussions also give their experience about that. In order to support growth avenues, particularly in India's blue economy, with maritime reinsurance and entice a great number of reinsurers into India, the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority has approved a series of modifications in the reinsurance sector. And I'm sure there are people here who will be able to elaborate on it, and that could also be fodder for thought on what can be done further. But I also feel a need has been felt to have a full-fledged India-owned and India-based protection and indemnity entity, the P&I entity, which is so important. I would think it is important to have a P&I of India's own ownership. And that, I would think, will be one of the very useful suggestion, if at all it comes, for the ministry to take it forward. What would that do to us? It would reduce India's vulnerability to international sanctions and pressures to provide greater strategic flexibility in the shipping operations. It will also provide protection of liabilities to the ships operating in coastal waters as well as inland waters during their operation. And it will also provide a foothold into the specialized segments of protection and indemnity business, which is currently dominated by very few players internationally, where presently India doesn't have a presence. I would think that is a very important thing which we need to work on. And also, the Indian protection and indemnity services can also help in encouraging and increasing maritime arbitrations in India. India, of course, you know, has passed an arbitration bill. We've got an arbitration center. We are now improving our strength in arbitration, and therefore to have arbitrations also happen in India. Most arbitrations now are carried on in Singapore or in United Kingdom. So no harm in that, but for a country as our size, for a coastline that we have, for the potential in maritime activities that we do have, at least we should start with an arbitration center in India so that our disputes are redressed here. We may eventually, for some reason or the other, still go to UK or still go to Singapore, but we should have an arbitration center here. Now, the financing bit. The cleaning up of the financial sector, which is a very domestic problem that we had. Our banks went through a very difficult time. Both the industry, companies, corporate sector, and also the government and the banks' balance sheets were all in difficulty when we came into power, when Prime Minister Modi took charge in 2014. We were called a fragile country, and we had a double balance sheet problem, where corporate sector was having a problem, similarly in their balance sheet, and similarly banks were having a problem. They had to be reconciled. Several decisions were taken. Toxic assets were all moved out of the bank. They are now being bought by companies which can, rearrange them and then get them the bad bank idea and so on. So now after that, banks and financial institutions have become better and are in a position to do more activities. So they have now become the important source of financing support for ship financing area, ports and shipyard and so on. There's also the establishment of something called a Sarod Ports, Society for Affordable Redressal of Dispute, ports related, as an alternative dispute resolution. But I will take on one aspect much more with Mr. Rajaram being here. He's the head of the GIFT City, IFSC, the Financial Services Center. So the International Financial Services Center Authority, IFSCA, located in the GIFT City, notified ship lease as a financial product. So we started on this point of, give recognition for maritime, for the ships and so on, the industry status. IFSCA has already done that. And it's also provided a framework for enabling ship finance and operating leases through framework for ship leasing. Various tax incentives are also and exemptions are also provided for ship leasing entities in the IFSC, including tax holiday for 10 years, no capital gains during tax holiday, stamp duty exemption for 5 years. Additional exemptions have also been granted on income generated by way of royalty or interest paid on account of lease of ships. No capital gains tax at all in the IFSC. On transfer of ships by a IFSC unit enjoying 100% tax exemption. So that can really develop as a haven for ship leasing. Government of India also in our budget in 2022 established, which I referred to for a minute ago, International Arbitration Center in the GIFT City. So faster dispute resolutions can be expected. There was this concern which was being expressed. I'm ceased of that matter, but I would put it here. An expert committee has also been constituted to relook at the harmonized master list. And that would streamline, once the findings come, it will streamline the understanding of infrastructure. The framework being developed by this committee would be instrumental in updating the HML list from time to time, not wait for another committee, but the framework will give the idea of how periodically you can go about changing and categorizing relevant sectors as infrastructure itself. So time won't be lost, it can be done at a good speed. So with all this, the financing part of it is something with which I would want the banks to work together with the shipping ministry. I'll certainly be saying it here, but I'll certainly be working together with Indian public sector banks, first to start with, and then with the others, the private sector as well, and the foreign banks as well, with the shipping ministry, so that banks understand and tell us where the glitches are. Why are they not willing to come forward? Is the risk higher than what they can digest, or any other issue? So now, standing here, I just want to make sure that this is heard by all, that we shall work with the banks and with the shipping ministry to make sure banks understand the need of the sector and deal with it, not waiting for the categorization, because today our banks are in a position to take big ticket credit extensions. So one last point on how this sector can also look at funding itself, and that's very important. I think of the 12 major ports, in 9 of them, at least 31 different projects on asset monetization has already been identified and approved. It's part of the asset monetization exercise. I would think maritime sector to take up, the cruise which is being planned for the west coast and the east, linking of Sri Lanka with a vessel going from Nagapattinam to Kanakeshanturai, more to come also in the southern coast. There's immense possibility. Financing and insurance. In fact, insurance is not something new to us. I don't want to go back to talk in great details, but Arthashastra also mentions about insurance. May not use the Hindi word bima for it. It had a collective pool collected for emergencies like fire or any disaster, so that that money can be shared. So ideas of insurance had existed in India, but today our model is completely dependent on the British model, and that is why everything that we do links up with Lloyd's of the world. So I would want some more looking at from the point of view of insurance capabilities that lie in India, insurance risks that are typical to this Indian peninsula, and also looking at flags or flag-bearing vessels of India, which are few and far between now. If we increase it, what kind of insurance and risks taking that we need to have. Thoughts to go on these points as well, so that we know where we are moving forward in taking the insurance sector, particularly for the maritime insurance, forward. So thank you very much for having me here. A lot of discussion points.
Our sincere thanks to Honorable Minister for those words of encouragement. Thank you, ma'am, for your leadership and for always taking India forward, ma'am. With that being said, let's jump right into the context setting for the discussion. For that, I'd like to invite Mr. Madhavendra Singh, CEO, Gujarat Maritime Cluster.